All right, it is a Monday. That means we get to spend time with our GM. It is Jim Duquette, the former Major League GM of the Mets and Orioles, MLB Network, Radio, Sirius XM. Follow him on X at Jim Duquette GM. His weekly visit brought to you by the fine folks at Flat Stick Pub. Whether it's a date night, guys' night, ladies' night, or large group event, they've got you covered at Flat Stick. Visit one of their 6 locations across the Northwest, flatstickpub.com. We are broadcasting inside the Puck Sports Studios, built by Limbach Lumber, family owned and serving the Northwest since 1930. They are the Northwest premier supplier of specialized lumber and moldings. And because Jim Summer is here, that means it's deck and fence season. So you can contact the folks at Limbach Lumber, 206-782-3487. Visit them online at limbachlumber.com. Again, Puck Sports Studios, built by Limbach Lumber. All right, baseball weekend. I'm sure it was hot and heavy. We can talk about the Mariners, Jim. The torrid pace again here still for Aaron Judge.
Yeah.
The Astros are rolling, but let's start first here with the M's, Jim, and Minnesota's a good team.
Yep.
Real good team. And they're going to be there at the very end, but losing 2 out of 3 in the manner in which they did. And the Mariners right now, they're going one way. The Astros are going another way right now.
They really are. I think that's, the concern, that 10-game lead now is dried up to, what is it now, 3.5, 4. That sign or those words that you sometimes have in your rearview mirror, objects appear further than they really are. That's the Astros creeping up on the Mariners, and I know Mariners fans probably feel like they're right on top of them. And right now I had a chance to watch both. Obviously, I watched in Houston more against the Mets, and they continue to play really well. They had 2 games that they came back from against the Mets bullpen that catapulted them to their victories in a series win, and the Mets were very hot too. So, Houston, when you're stacking up against another hot team, I always like to see that series and see what it looks like. They're playing really well. Offense is really perked up. The pitching and the bullpen's gotten it together. Now they go to Toronto, where Toronto is really struggling. So, I think there's some things there that are concerning, from the Mariners side, just with the competition. Now, I talked to Jerry DiPoto yesterday on my show, and I'll fill you in on some things there. But he brought up a good point that I wanted to share with you and get your thoughts. But, when last year at this time, when you would talk about the Mariners, the same story. The offense was not clicking on all cylinders. They were not in first place at the time either. And they went on a run. And their offense internally, they went on a run too. And so while he understands the disappointment, and there has been some improvements in June offensively, it's not what they want, and they have several guys that are struggling. They're hoping that internally, until they can make an acquisition, that they start to swing the bat like what happened last year. So that's kind of the internal eval and the internal feeling. They recognize that the offense is not what they expected for sure.
Okay, so there's a lot there. Let's see. You got the impression how aggressive that they will be at the deadline. What was your impression of that from him?
Very aggressive, for sure. Money was not going to be an issue. I know that's been an issue. They've said that before, but he was basically confirming that again. Like, adding payroll is not going to be an issue. Offense is definitely where they need to add. Maybe a bullpen arm. Although they are getting Santos back here soon, which is a good sign. But he would like to get a little more depth on that side of it as well. So it seemed like offense and bullpen. And there wouldn't be financial constraints necessarily like there were this past winter. He wouldn't acknowledge that this winter, but you and I both know that was the case. So, I think that was his feeling on that. They will be aggressive. But he also said this, and we've had this conversation, you and I. He said there's less than 3 teams that are ready to actually sell right now. And I think if you look at it, the ones that stand out are the Marlins and the White Sox. And I don't even think the Rockies are going to sell at the moment. So he felt like it would start to heat up after the draft, which is going to be it's 2 weeks from yesterday's when the amateur draft is going to be. And so it's just a matter of having those conversations and it's a fluid issue. Like right now, I'd say the Cubs are out, but they might be back in if they go on a little bit of a win streak. Like just having to monitor those conversations with opposing GMs.
Jim, you got to when you talked to Jerry yesterday, and this was on your show yesterday, right? Sirius XM.
Correct. That was on my front office show. Jim Bowden and I, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time, and he came on in our last hour.
You have to probably understand the collective groan when listeners and viewers hear you relay what Jerry said. There will be no financial constraints. That has been said for the last 3 years.
Right.
That there's no financial constraints. There's no, and yet everything that they do is nothing but a financial constraint.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't think there's anyone here, and I don't think people would come after you. That's what he told you guys.
Right.
It's what he said. It's that there's no one here in this town that believes that.
Right.
That there's just no way that they believe. And so to hear him say it, they'll just roll their eyes.
Right. It's totally fair. And and I think the answer from as we're kind of talking about this is the proof will be in the pudding. Like and there are some owners that say that they're going to they say one thing and they do the complete opposite. I worked for one, right? So. Like I understand, like I used to have to go out and say, oh yeah, there'll be no financial constraints, but knowing that there was, and so part of that job, unfortunately, President Baseball Ops, General Manager, is protecting your owner on that and saying some things that might be true because he said it to you, but it really, even the owner didn't tell you the whole story, so there is quite possibly that issue, but I don't think you can really believe what is going to be said or done until they actually get to that deadline and we see what happens. Yeah. So, I think unfortunately that's the case. And it's like that with probably, I don't know, at least 10 other organizations that kind of operate similarly.
Yeah, I just think that it's Mariner fans have just heard it over and over again, and I think they're smart enough to understand. When Jerry says something like that, or anybody from the front office says it, it's because I don't know what else they're supposed to say. They're never going to come out and say, well, we've been handcuffed financially, we can't do anything. They would never undercut their ownership group. But I think what you just said, the proof is in the pudding, that, hey, this whole off season was nothing but a salary dump. I mean, they're just, we talk, we've talked before, but you're watching Jared Kelenic thrive right now with the Atlanta Braves. And the only reason he's not a member of the Mariners anymore is because they wanted to get rid of a contract in Marco Gonzalez. And in order for Atlanta to do that, to take on him, they had to take on Evan White and they had to take on Jared Kelenic.
That's right.
So they could just dump salary. So it's hard, I think, for Mariner fans will never be convinced that they are truly all in until at some point financially they truly go all in.
Yeah. Well, and the Kelenic conversation, not only, is it, glaring about their ownership and trying to save money there, but it also is glaring on their hitting approach when you send Kelenic off to Atlanta. And they, I had some concerns as well about what they were actually getting, but for him to go off the way he has here recently and hit in the leadoff spot and swing it the way he is, that place is a hitter's ballpark. But it does make you wonder about the hitting philosophy of the organization and the Mariners. When you have a guy like that who struggled mightily, as you well know, and we talked about, and him going on to, it's not even a full season yet of him being in a different organization, and he's crushing it, right now, in that leadoff spot. So that's got to be frustrating for sure. But, I think that there would, in my opinion, there are ways, now that I've done this media side for a bit, there are ways to say, whether you have it or not, hey, we have a little bit of room or leeway. We are going to have to be creative. That's what other general managers say when they have restrictions on their ownership. So, I am kind of curious, because if he shows that there is no real additional payroll, the organization is going to get crushed nationally. I can tell you that.
Well, yeah, because there are so many missing pieces, or there are so many positions on this roster in which they could improve on. I think you could, which makes where they're at right now, Jim, kind of remarkable
Yes.
in a way that they're 8 games over 500 and still clinging to this lead. In part, the reason they've had this lead is because of the, Texas and Houston just not performing well. Now, especially with Houston, they are, but, they have, first base, designated hitter, second base, third base, and then I think you can pick I don't think you have to say both corner outfields, maybe just say one.
Right.
And that's 5 legitimate spots. Now, they're not going to go out and acquire 5 new players, no one, unless it's going to be the most crazy trade deadline in the history of the sport. Likely we'll go get at least one bat.
Right.
I don't know, maybe 2, but at least one. And then, of course, you mentioned before a bullpen arm. But let's say it's, they add a bat. I mean, is there anyone, would one bat really, truly, significantly help this offense?
The guy that stands out to me when I look at, and the Cubs are still right now in a holding pattern, but I feel like Cody Bellinger, who is a fit there this winter, is a fit there now. The flexibility that he brings to play the outfield and first base. And he started to swing the bat better. And he said recently, he goes, I expect way more out of myself, and I'm about to go off and whatever. But if that team doesn't figure something out here quickly, I think they're going to make a change and send off a couple of players. And he's a guy that will get they can get some value for, and he's a really good fit in Seattle. So that's the one guy. Like Pete Alonso, you can pretty much forget he's going to be available right now, the way the Mets have turned their season around. But if they fell back, he would be another guy. But that's the guy for me that I go, whoa, Seattle, they got to be on him. And I expect that they would be. The other thing you were mentioning, like, very rarely when I talk to a GM, you talk about their offense, and they go, well, the guys that are doing well right now are the complementary players. Raley, Moore, Canzone, Rojas. Like he didn't name Julio. Julio's got a 12-game streak without an RBI. Are you kidding me right now? Every position player that is an everyday guy, he didn't mention they need improvement on all of them all. It's just crazy how much this entire roster right now is struggling, except for the complementary pieces.
You're right. It's the cameo players.
Yeah.
It's the cameo players that are having success. And for Julio, it is, at what point we are 86 games, I believe, right, into the season right now. Are we 86 or 88? I can't. You know what? I'm not going to do math. I try to add it up and quickly in my head. We're nearing 90 games. All right, yeah. We're almost at
86 right now. Yep,
86. We're at the All-Star game coming up here shortly. These are his numbers where he ranks right now in baseball. He's got the 134th in OPS, 139th in slugging. He's the 82nd batting average. He's 142nd in home runs, 135th in RBIs. I mean, what is wrong with him?
Yeah. There has to be something mechanical going on here, right? So that's the thing that and sometimes what ends up happening is when you have struggles, then you're making adjustments, and then you make another adjustment, and before you know it, you get to a position where you're like, boy, that's not even the same guy, So I could do an analysis and look at some video and see, but to me, that's number one. Number two, I do think there is a little bit of the analysis portion over and analyzing, and there's an over preparation that sometimes happens with organizations, and that's why I think they changed out the hitting guy. Was Brant Brown was giving him a lot to think about, it sounds like, in terms of being prepared. Here's what the guy's going to offer. Here are the percentages that he's throwing these type of pitches. And you go up there, and it paralyzes you to some degree as a hitter. And so, I think that, there was probably a little bit of that as well with Julio. But, he doesn't have a ton of protection. They need another guy in that lineup. And, I always mention J.D. Martinez because he's one of the smartest players out there, but he's also what is called we call them cage guys. But like around the cage, they love to talk about hitting. They have a high energy and impact Carlos Santana was that type of guy. Like the teams and hitters, they kind of congregate around him. They need a guy like that, like a Carlos Santana or a JD Martinez or somebody like that to be a part of this. And I think one guy can have an impact on an entire lineup, but they got to find that guy.
Yeah, it's struggling. It's a struggle to watch, and as much as you get so excited about how they pitch, right, Jim, and watching them, for the most part, have if not the best pitching staff. I mean, it's certainly in the conversation. I think a lot of teams would take the Phillies, but overall, their starters have kept them afloat and kept them alive. It's just a hard watch offensively. I went to the game on Saturday, and we all love baseball, and I watched it, and I'm like, I just can't watch a team strike out 15 times and not put the ball in play. And I know that's a frustration with a lot of fans watching this sport over the last few years, and I don't know how to solve it. I don't know what you do to solve it. But when you go and sit and watch a game that was 3+ hours, I mean, it was like a throwback game before the pitch clock, 3+ hours in which everyone strikes out and no one puts the ball in play. God, man, it's hard. Yeah. It's hard to sit through that. There's not enough beer in the stands to help me get through that game on Saturday.
Yeah, it's a real problem. And, being the worst in the game in terms of striking out, they struck out the most still. And there had been a small window early in June, right after they made the change, where they had seen improvement, and it's back to the old striking out. Like you said, double digits again. Like it's frustrating, and sometimes you can combat it by being more aggressive early in the count. But then that has its own issues as well, because you're swinging at sometimes expanding the strike zone, and putting together kind of soft contact, or you're allowing a starting pitcher to go deeper in the game than you really want. Like there's all these other inherent things. So there has to be a balance there. But I think right now, the big frustration is how many hitters are struggling as bad as they are. And, you can sit there. There's no other way. You cannot sugarcoat it. And I will give the organization credit for this. They don't sugarcoat it either. Like they just don't, and so, the solution really is to get better hitters and, hitters that have that track record, and have a little bit more impact. And, they just don't have that in this lineup.
Could you get a sense when you talked to Jerry DiPoto on your show yesterday, Sirius XM? I would figure they would be able to find that anywhere, any podcast platform. Probably
you can get that on demand on Sirius XM on demand, and just put in front office, in yesterday's date, and you can get that. He was in our final hour, and so basically 12:30 Eastern, but the final hour of the show, about 30 minutes in. Yep.
Okay. Did you get a sense of the player that they would be looking at? He's not going to come out and say, well, yeah, we like Luis Robert Jr., we like Vlad Guerrero. Could you get a sense that, a Guerrero, Robert Jr., guys like that are in play for them? You already mentioned Cody Bellinger, and it's interesting because you could have – this is, I think, where Mariner fans get a little bit frustrated, Jim, is that you could have had him in the offseason for $80 million, which really was kind of was a bargain, 3 years, $80 million, and you could have had him, and you don't have to give up any prospects. Now, if you want to go out and get them, now you're going to have to, dip into your farm system, guys that you value. And I think that's where a lot of fans get frustrated, because you don't have to part with any of these guys. You can just spend your money, which are unwilling to do so. All right, that wasn't a question. That was more of a rant. So could you get a sense at all of who they would be looking at the deadline?
So, he wasn't in, you're restricted by who you can, what you can say. But when he said there's only 2 or 3 teams that are available, but that are, sellers right now, we know who those are. White Sox are willing to consider Luis Robert, but it's not a guarantee that they would do it. Eloy Jimenez is another for sure. Mariners have Josh Bell. That's not going to solve much. Jazz Chisholm's a guy whose name keeps getting mentioned. He's an outfielder. Can really hit, left-handed hitter. in that situation up there, I think he'd be an interesting fit. He needs a stronger clubhouse there, presence and a leadership role there. But there's just not, you're talking about two teams that are really struggling offensively, too, in Miami and the White Sox. So it's not like, but you have a couple guys with track records. So, I would go in on Luis Robert, now that might require him to move to a corner because you got Julio in center field, which, you got to get that answer too sometimes, right? Like he plays center field for the White Sox. Is he willing to go to right field?
Right.
So, there is that aspect. He's probably not a perfect fit. I think the first base fit, like I said, with Bellinger, and you're going to have to wait to get an answer on that one for probably for another 2 weeks or so.
And he's left-handed, which would, they
right.
For the most part of it, they've never had a real good power, left-hand hitting bat in their lineup.
Right. Yeah. Well, and batting balance in the lineup is important as anything, right? And getting the left-handed bat, to kind of go with these, obviously Crawford from the left side, you have Raley from the left side, you have a couple guys like that. Polanco hasn't done anything, but you've got a few guys, but impactful type left-handed bat. Bellinger would fit that description.
What's the price tag for Bellinger?
So, the interestingly right now, I was looking at this because, you look at prospects and, it's going to take an impactful guy. They're probably looking for three different guys. If I'm Jerry, I'm going, I'm not moving Cole Young, and I'm probably, trying to stay away from Harry Ford too, but any of the other guys I'd have to put into that equation. It's going to be multiple guys. So, anywhere in, I'm looking at MLB Pipeline in their list right now. You have Cole Emerson, you got Montez, you got that group there that, they would have to be the, part of the headliners and probably have to have at least two others, and, the question for me would be on Bellinger is, he's got those club options, it's a 1 year opt out. It's not likely he would opt out, but you don't want to give up four guys if he's going to opt out at the end of the year, too. So, I'm pretty sure the opt-out is after each of the next season. So you'd have to kind of sort through that aspect, which adds a little bit of a complicating factor.
Yeah. What would you do with Jorge Polanco? That's talk in this town already is how much more time you're going to give him.
Yeah.
He's battled injuries. I'm not sure if Jerry got into that subject at all with you guys yesterday, but how much more time would you be willing to give him, because they don't owe him any money next season.
Right.
So they can just get out of it. You get a sense of that at all speaking with him, or what would you do with the Polanco situation right now?
I didn't get a sense of what he would do with Polanco. I think when you're in these situations, though, the urgency is such that you can't keep marching him out there if you have better options. And if you're not going to release him, then he ends up being put in a platoon role or bench role, and you just do matchups. But you got to find a guy that's going to fit into that role. I just use the Mets as an example. They have a guy that they're paying a lot of money to, and Jeff McNeil. He has a couple years left on his contract, and he is really struggling. He's at the bottom of the offensive category in a lot of categories, and their manager has gone into a platoon type situation or limiting him against right-handed hitters only. And we're at that point. We're past that point, honestly, with Polanco, but I don't know if they have any other options to go in that spot anyway, right? So if they could and should, they should look at him in just a straight up platoon at this point.
Yeah, Aaron Judge just continues to do it.
He's incredible. He's got 31 home runs.
It's
like go look at the next closest, right? You go look at the team leader for the Mariners right now. If you really want to be depressed, and compare him to Judge's 31, like it is crazy. And just the numbers that he's put up this month, in June, like and even from middle of May, he had a slow start in April. And you look at his numbers since then, people talk about, oh, he's on a pace for 60. No, he's on a pace for more than that, just because of how much he's got. If you just took that 45-game window that he's on, I think
isn't it 95?
Yeah, right. He'd be on a pace of 90, 95. So like, where does he end up? I don't know, but it's been unbelievable.
Where do you stand on this? It's starting to become a topic. We're almost halfway through the season. We're going to start talking about awards at some point. Where are you at on? I mean, there has been no better player, at least hitter this season in baseball. Well, besides Judge, right?
Right.
Than Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah.
Where are you at with because he only DHs, a DH winning the MVP?
I'm okay with the DH winning the MVP. Now, the only issue that I have in that is if it's close, the numbers are close between, and you have to use some other metrics to there's something like wins above replacement. I like to use that as a barometer and others, rankings. But if you have you got Judge. Let's take National League, right? Because
let's just take Bryce Harper, because Bryce Harper right. is pretty much close to him
right.
on a lot of the offensive categories.
Right, and before he got hurt, Betts was up there too and wins above replacement. Yeah. So if it's close, then I'm giving it to the position player, because it's going out there and playing every single day and contributing in that way too is undervalued. Mm-hmm. And secondly, and this won't factor in it with Ohtani and Harper, but did you help your team win? So some of these writers, they don't take that into consideration. I think it's a joke that you don't consider it. Like helping your team win is what matters. Like, right. Okay, yeah, you're part of a good team, but helping your team get to the postseason rather than the Andre Dawson, who had a great year that one year back, back I think it was 87 or 8, I think it was 1987. Had a tremendous year, but they were last place. Like, you could have been in last place with him or without him. Like, what contribution did he have? He had a great season, but did he have any contribution to the team winning? The answer is no.
There will be no discussion in the American League who will win it. I mean, Judge will win this thing running away. And you just look at it right now, 316. He's slugging 708. He has 31 home runs, and he's already driven in 82. Wow.
I mean, Juan Soto was going to give it a run there for a while, but now the Judge has just hit the ground, and he's even left his own teammate in the dust. I will say, Judge has been and Soto's been a huge influence on each other, but within that mm-hmm. lineup too. Now the lineup isn't quite what it was, and it's taken some hits. They are carried by those two guys right now, but Judge is the clear MVP, and then you'll get some votes for the two shortstops right now: Bobby Witt Jr. in Kansas City, Gunnar Henderson here in Baltimore. But Judge is the guy.
What was your philosophy on trading when you were a GM, trading within the division? We've out here, we've talked a little bit about, what teams who are already out of it, right?
Right.
Angels are one of those teams. And, people have looked at Luis Rengifo and say, well, that could be a good fit here for Seattle, a guy that could slide over there and play third base. But again, the history between DePoto, Artie Moreno, and that didn't end well.
Right.
They've never completed a trade with one another. Do you think a relationship like that, and because it ended so poorly, would prevent those two teams from ever getting together and making a deal happen?
I mean, philosophically, it really depends, right? So I don't think Artie Moreno is going to do any favors, certainly for Jerry. So that one might be a tough one. I think Perry Manassian, their general manager, if he gets what he wants, he's okay. He's fine with it. I go back to when Jack Sorensic was general manager, didn't he trade Cliff Lee to Texas? Wasn't it for the switch hitting first baseman whose name escapes me right now?
Justin Smoke?
Yeah, Justin Smoke. Didn't that happen?
Oh, you know what? I think that sounds right.
Doesn't that sound right to you?
But I'm gonna pull it up real quick.
Yeah, see if you can pull that up. If my memory serves me right, I remember talking to Jack about it, and he's like, you know what? I have no problem trading within the division if I get the player that I want. And Smoke was a switch hitting first baseman that might have been the hope was that he was going to turn into Richie Sexson, but a switch hitter. And
he did. You know what? A spoiler. He did not.
He did not. He did not. He did not to go back into that Wayback Machine. But so you do see some of those. So I had this philosophy: if I was in New York, right, and when I was like, if I had a player that the Yankees wanted. It wasn't going to be an impactful player that I traded to them. I was not going to be the guy that traded them the player that got them a parade down the Canyon of Heroes in New York. Like I gotta live there. I gotta go out to restaurants where there's Yankee fans and Met fans. Like, I wasn't going to do that, and we didn't want to do that. But some people are okay with it within the division. You got to be careful, though.
You're right. July 9th, 2010, they traded Cliff Lee along with Mark Lowe for Justin Smoke. That was the headliner. Blake Bevan, Josh Lukey,
Yep.
and Matt Lawson. So yeah, you're right. Yeah. They did trade within there within the division. So we shall see what they do, and hopefully they get active.
Yeah.
Because they definitely need some much needed help. All right, you're the best. We appreciate Jim Duquette with us every Monday. Former MLB GM for the Mets and Orioles, MLB Network Radio, Sirius XM. Go there and find on the on demand page there and search it. You can find his interview yesterday. It's the final hour of the show there with Mariners GM Jerry Dipoto. His weekly visit brought to you by Flat Stick Pub. Again, whether it's a date night, guys night, ladies night, large group event, they've got you covered at flatstickpub.com. Jim Duquette live from the Puck Sports Studios built by Limbach Lumber. Jim, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks, sir.
Thanks, Jay. See you.